We're going to have some fun as I explain to the mainstream media how to speak Queens and Brooklyn so they can better understand President Donald Trump. Now, there's a really good piece in The Federalist entitled, "To Understand Trump, You Must Speak Outer Borough" by David Marcus. It's actually great. And the piece says, President Trump spent almost all of his childhood in Queens and still sounds like it. Even his accent and facial posture give this away. Now, I'm very comfortable with the way President Trump speaks. I was very comfortable from day one. I actually enjoy it. I love it. It makes me laugh. And it's probably because I'm also a guy from Queens. Now, I'm not as pronounced in the way I speak and present as Trump is, but I worked in media for a bit, and before that in political affairs. And so I had to tone it down. Now, when I was a New York City cop, I sounded like a guy from New York City. I had a strong New York accent and mannerisms, but as you go through your professional career and needs are what they are, you tone it down a bit. But when I'm with my friends from Queens and Brooklyn and Long Island and parts of New Jersey, I sort of revert. I fall back into those old habits. Now, you can hear when I speak to you on air that I still definitely have a Queens dialect on some words, and I never want to lose that. It makes me who I am. I love it. It makes me the individual person that I am, and I'm very proud of where I grew up, and I'm proud of my lifelong friendships. And I want to read you some things in this piece because they're great. Now, I watched this interview the other night with actor Scott Baio, a staunch conservative, big supporter of the president. He was talking to Jesse Waters on Fox News. And I was cheering. I was like, yes, Scott, because he was really nailing it and nailing the problem. So let me read you some of what Scott Baio said to Jesse Waters on Fox. He said, quote, "I'm going to help the media right now, okay? I'm going to try to help them. Not going to go anywhere, but I'm going to try to help them because they've called the president. The president has dementia. He's an idiot. He's not mature. I'm from Brooklyn. President Trump is from Queens." And Scott basically goes on to say that that's how we are. He says, the president is from Queens. This is what we do. We mess with people. That's all. Now, I can't tell you how accurate and true this is. So to explain that, let me give you some personal observations, okay? When I was a New York City cop back in the 90s, I'm in my early 20s, had a really strong New York accent. I had those mannerisms. Now, I grew up in a neighborhood, only about 5 neighborhoods east of where Donald Trump grew up. In fact, I rode the New York City buses to high school every day through Donald Trump's neighborhood. I would, if I wanted to go into Manhattan from where I lived, I had to pick up the subway and ride through his neighborhood on the bus to get there. And I have many friends who grew up in the same neighborhood as Donald Trump. Trump sounds like my dad. He sounds like my friends' dads. He sounds like all my friends in New York. But I had dated, back when I was a cop in my early 20s, I had dated this girl from Georgia. And she was very sweet, very nice girl, and very Southern, very respectable, and polite in the way she presented herself. It was yes, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, sir, and no, ma'am. And it was great. And she was horrified, aghast at the way my friends and I spoke to each other. Now, these are my lifelong friends. We still talk and text and speak, a couple of them every day, others several times a week. We've known each other many years. One of them I know since I'm 7 years old. And despite us living in different states, one's in Maine, one is in North Carolina, one's in New York, and I'm down here in Florida. We are very close, but the way we would speak to each other when we were younger, and even to this day, would horrify somebody not used to that. And so I'll never forget, first time this girl I dating back then ever met my friends, and she left, and she had this look on her face. It was really disturbed, and we left this particular bar, and she said, wow. She said, I don't even know how to react to the way you guys talk to one another. Because I'd walk in the place and it was you, this and that. I get it, and making fun of what each other was wearing and making fun of each other's hair and making fun of just about everything and just harassing each other all night long and laughing hysterically doing so. And it really is just a New York outer borough thing. Now, this piece goes on to say that people from, let me read it to you because it's right. People from the outer boroughs exaggerate everything. This, quote, hyperbolic analogy is extremely common along the lines of, this freaking guy, I'm waiting 3 days for a cup of coffee. Now, obviously, that is not meant to be taken literally. And this is what as Scott Baio said, it's just to mess with people. It's true. You're not literally waiting there for 72 calendar hours for a cup of coffee. But I still do it. If I'm on the phone with my friends and we talk about, Jim Acosta from CNN. I'm like, oh, this guy is the biggest moron in the world. I mean, Jesus, you could go far and wide around the world and not find a bigger moron than this guy. Now, is that literally true? Well, probably not. I'm guessing that Jim Acosta has a good education, and one-on-one, he's probably an intelligent guy once you get past the politics. I'm sure that in a world of 6 billion plus people, he's not the biggest moron. He's not the dumbest guy in the world. But it's just the way we speak. And that's what Donald Trump does. But we also know that it's a great way to get under the skin of people who don't really understand it. Now, hyperbolic analogy is a great way to analyze the president's North Korea tweet, the North Korean nuclear button tweet. Now, of course, the president of the United States understands that this isn't a Looney Tunes cartoon. We don't have a big red nuclear button on his desk. Of course he understands that. The media would have you believe he doesn't, because CNN and all the usual suspects were fact-checking Sarah Sanders when she talked about a nuclear button. Also remember that the term nuclear button was first used by Kim from North Korea. So the president, knowing how to get under his skin, using his outer borough New York City-isms, says basically, my nuclear button is bigger than yours, essentially to say, we'll annihilate you if you get out of hand. Now, the president clearly, in saying nuclear button, is referring to our nuclear arsenal, the protocols one must go through to launch nuclear weapons. What he was really saying was, if you even think about launching nuclear weapons, the United States, much more powerful, much more accurate, much greater nuclear arsenal, is going to be aimed directly at you and will annihilate you. But it's a lot more effective to say, I've got a bigger nuclear button than you do, and I'll use it. Oh, by the way, mine works, in reference to Kim and North Korea's missiles falling into the sea. President saying the U.S. missiles are 50 plus years of technology. They've been perfected. They can hit a bullseye from many thousands of miles away. So, take a step back, Kim, and understand who you're dealing with here. And unfortunately, the media doesn't get that. And I like that. I like that in the article they use the term truthful hyperbole, because that's really what it is. You also have to understand why Trump gets aggressive with the mainstream media and North Korea and some of the people that are perceived as enemies and adversaries. When you grow up outside of New York, you are really about your group, your team, okay? Here at The Rebel, I really love working here and being on air at The Rebel. And the people who work here are wonderful, from the production team to Ezra, who runs the network, to the hosts. And many of them I haven't met in person, but now they're part of my team. So if an outsider were to attack them, I'm going to respond just as aggressively in their defense as I would if someone at The Rebel who I work with every day was attacked, someone that I know personally, people that have now become my friends. Even those hosts and those other staffers that I don't know, they're still going to get that same aggressive defense from me because they're part of my team. And that really is culturally the way we grew up in the outer boroughs of New York City. When somebody's from your neighborhood, when they're your friend or a friend of your friends, or you work in the same place or you go to the same school, they become part of your team. You can joke around with them. You can beat them up. You can insult them in a laughing way, and you guys jab back and forth, but an outsider better not do that. An outsider better never do that, because they're going to see the wrath if they do. And that's really how a guy like Donald Trump sees America and Americans. You didn't have to vote for him, but now you're part of his team. Now you're one of his people. Now you're an American citizen that he's protecting. You're one of his own. And that's why he reverts back to that tough Queens guy who came up in the tough real estate business in New York, who came up in the tough world of finance in New York, and he's going to protect you like he's going to protect his own family. And that's what a lot of people in the media don't understand. And I really like the way that that Marcus wrote this piece, because in his closing paragraph, his closing section, actually, several paragraphs, he said, let's move on for Pete's sake. For better or worse, this is the leadership that the American people voted for when they elected Trump. Unlike much of the media, those voters understand when Trump is joking or being hyperbolic. The most important piece of this, he says, they get it and they like it. And he's 100% right. The guys who swing hammers for a living, the carpenters, my old friends, the cops, the firemen, they love it because Trump sounds like them. He sounds like their friends and their brothers and their dads and their uncles. And it resonates with them. They're comfortable with it. They enjoy it. Finally, somebody's speaking with them, not at them. Somebody who's speaking as if he's on their level. He understands their frustration, not dictating to them how he, the elite, is going to solve the problems of the masses, of the plebeian peasants. Trump doesn't speak down to people. He's a billionaire who connects with the iron worker, the plumber, the factory worker, the assembly line guy. And that is a gift. That is a communications gift that is grossly underestimated by the mainstream media. He says the colorful language of Queens and Kings counties, Kings County, if you don't know, is Brooklyn, works differently than the staid and plain words used in Manhattan and Washington, D.C., but they still work. And many times are much more effective because they're much more pithy and powerful. And he's saying that we should avoid silly disputes about buttons, literal or metaphoric, in the future. But the media should heed Scott Baio's advice. And instead of piling up examples of obvious hyperbole, they should just realize what Trump is saying. Trump, he says accurately, brushes it off and goes on his merry way, because he does. One of the other things you learn when you're a guy from Queens or Brooklyn or those areas is you become pretty thick-skinned, because as much as you dish it out, you better be able to take it, because if you can't take it, you're not going to be hanging out with that group of guys much longer, girls much longer. And Trump is a guy who understands. He dishes it out, but he takes it right back, and then he gives it back harder. And people say, well, that's thin skin. No, that's about winning. You dish it out, you get it back, you dish it out harder. Ultimately, somebody's gonna blink. And we don't want our president to blink, so I love that he does that. They end this by saying, and I thought it was a perfect ending, is Trump going to change how he talks? Forget about it. That being the case, the news needs to learn to speak Queens and stop treating the president and his speech the way they treat typical politicians. Really not that hard. And it's true. They want everyone to be like them. They're hysterical that Trump tweets, that he doesn't go through them for dissemination of information. They're hysterical that Trump is aggressive when they like, and I'm talking about they being the mainstream media elites and their liberal cronies in politics and the public. They want a pacifist, a capitulator like Obama. They don't like a strong United States. They want globalism, not American exceptionalism, not an America First agenda. And they want someone who looks, acts, and sounds like them, not an outsider who's disrupted their little party and is about to burn down the stranglehold they've had on D.C. for too many years. If you like this content, if you find it as fun as I find bringing it to you, please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. If you're already a subscriber, thank you very, very much. And be sure to check out my new, much longer show, Off the Cuff Declassified, where we go much deeper in all these topics. Great guests, much, much more. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.